What if I told you that for 4 straight months a Russian field radio kept transmitting orders to Moscow, and not a single word coming out of it was real by the time 3 Russian generals had been quietly removed from their commands? No one in the Kremlin had figured out that the voice they had been trusting since October was never on their side. October 2nd, 2024, a Ukrainian reconnaissance team operating near the village of Kupiansk recovered something from the wreckage of a Russian command vehicle that had been struck the night before. It was a portable encrypted field radio, the model used by mid-level Russian command posts to coordinate artillery, drone strikes, and supply movement across the Eastern Front. The device was scorched on one side, but the internal circuitry was intact. According to later interviews with Ukrainian signal officers, the radio still had its authentication codes loaded, its frequency hopping schedule intact, and its operator handle, the call sign Korshun, registered to a brigade headquarters near the city of Belgorod. The standard procedure in such cases was simple. The radio would be sent back to a technical analysis unit, stripped of its codes, and either repurposed or quietly discarded. But on that morning, a young Ukrainian electronic warfare officer named Lieutenant Marko Petrenko, 27 years old, a former software engineer from Lviv, asked his commander a different question. He asked what would happen if the radio was not silenced, but kept alive, kept transmitting, kept answering, just under different hands. The commander, a colonel named Yerema Volin, listened for 9 minutes, then approved the idea and forwarded it up the chain. Within 72 hours, the operation had a name, Operation Glass Voice. The name itself, according to officers who later spoke about the project, was meant to capture the central idea behind it. Glass is something you can see straight through, if you know how to look at it. The first transmission was sent on the morning of October 8th. It was a routine status report. Position holding, ammunition adequate. 2 casualties from drone strike, evacuated. The Russian receiving station, located near Belgorod, acknowledged the message with the standard return code. There was no suspicion, no hesitation, no second check. The voice on the other end matched the right cadence, the right slang, the right pauses. Lieutenant Petrenko's team had spent 6 days studying old recordings of Russian field operators, mapping their speech patterns, their habits, even the way they cleared their throats before reading numbers. The result was a Ukrainian officer fluent in Russian, trained for weeks, who could speak in a way that no algorithm or human ear in Moscow flagged as suspicious. Every detail had been rehearsed inside a small acoustic room in eastern Ukraine, including the background sounds of a working command post. For the first 3 weeks, the team did almost nothing. They listened. They reported only what was already true. They sent positions that matched real Russian positions. They confirmed orders that had already been executed. The goal, as Petrenko later described it in a closed briefing, was not to lie, not yet. The goal was to be trusted, and by the end of October, Korshun, the captured radio with a Ukrainian voice, was considered one of the most reliable forward command nodes on that section of the front. By early November, Korshun was being asked for opinions, tactical recommendations, confirmations of intelligence coming from other units. That was the moment the operation moved into its second phase. The team understood that the next words spoken on that frequency would carry weight in Moscow, and that every choice from that point forward would be measured in lives, careers, and miles of contested ground. The first false coordinate was transmitted on November 14th. It was a small thing. A reported sighting of a Ukrainian artillery battery in a wooded area 12 kilometers behind the front line. The location was real, the sighting was not. There had been a Ukrainian battery in that area 3 months earlier, but the unit had moved long before. Russian command, trusting Korshun, ordered a drone strike. The drones found nothing. According to leaked Russian internal reports later reviewed by Western analysts, the strike was logged as a target relocation event, with no further investigation. That was when Petrenko's team understood something important. The Russian command structure was not built to question Korshun. It was built to act on Korshun. And once a source has been treated as reliable for long enough, the system around it stops asking whether it should be. Over the next 4 months, what began as small misdirections grew into something far larger. Korshun reported Ukrainian troop concentrations that did not exist. Korshun confirmed the absence of Ukrainian forces in areas that were heavily defended. Korshun warned of supply convoys moving on routes that had been empty for weeks. Each transmission was carefully calibrated. Some were partially true, to maintain credibility. Others were entirely fabricated, but designed to align with what Russian command already wanted to believe. According to Ukrainian officers familiar with the operation, the team studied Russian intelligence assumptions for hours each night, then crafted transmissions that confirmed those assumptions, gently steering Russian decisions in directions that served Ukrainian interests. They were not telling Moscow what to think. They were telling Moscow what Moscow already wanted to hear. The consequences began to show in early December. A Russian armored column, acting on a Korshun report, advanced into a wooded area, expecting to flank a weakened Ukrainian position. The column found a heavily prepared defensive line. The advance was halted, several vehicles were lost, and the responsible commander was reportedly relieved within 72 hours. In Moscow, the failure was attributed to faulty intelligence from a different source. Korshun was not blamed. Korshun was not even reviewed. 2 weeks later, a similar pattern repeated near Avdiivka, where a Russian unit was sent toward what Korshun had described as an undefended logistics hub. The hub, in fact, was a known Ukrainian observation post. The Russian unit took losses and withdrew. Once again, the failure was assigned to a different intelligence channel. Korshun, in the eyes of the system that depended on it, remained beyond suspicion. By January, 3 senior Russian officers connected to the Eastern Front had been quietly removed from their positions. None of them had been told the real reason. According to Russian sources cited later by independent journalists, the official explanation involved poor judgment, misallocation of resources, and inadequate verification of field intelligence. The word Korshun did not appear in any of the dismissal documents. Inside the Ukrainian command center, where Operation Glass Voice was being run, a small whiteboard tracked the names. 3 commanders, 3 careers ended, not by a missile, not by a drone, but by a voice that was never theirs. The whiteboard, according to one officer, had no celebratory marks next to the names. Just dates, regions, and a short note describing what each removal had cost the Russian side, in terms of time and momentum. The operation continued through February and into early March, but Petrenko's team understood that no deception lasts forever. They began preparing what they called the soft exit. Slowly, the transmissions from Korshun became less frequent. The reasons given were realistic: damaged equipment, power issues, personnel rotation. By mid-March, Korshun went silent for the last time. There was no dramatic ending, no final transmission, just a slow fade, the kind of disappearance that no one questions because it happens every day on every front. To this day, according to publicly available reporting, the Russian side has never officially confirmed that Korshun was compromised, and the full scope of what was done with that single captured radio remained classified inside Ukrainian intelligence archives. What makes Operation Glass Voice remarkable is not the technology. The radio was standard. The encryption was standard. The frequencies were standard. What made it remarkable was the patience, the willingness to spend 3 weeks earning trust before telling a single lie, the discipline to keep some transmissions truthful, just to protect the ones that were not, the understanding that in modern war, the most powerful weapon is sometimes not what you fire, but what the other side believes is true. 3 Russian generals lost their commands during those 4 months. None of them, as far as is publicly known, ever learned that the voice they had been listening to since October was sitting in a different room, in a different country, speaking on behalf of the people they were trying to find. And in that gap between what was heard and what was real, an entire chapter of the Eastern Front quietly turned in a direction that Moscow never saw coming. In the months that followed, Operation Glass Voice became a case study inside Ukrainian electronic warfare doctrine, though the details remained tightly held. According to officers who later spoke with Western journalists on background, the lessons drawn from those 4 months reshaped how Ukrainian forces approached every captured Russian communication device after that point. A radio was no longer just hardware. A radio was a relationship built over weeks that could be inherited rather than discarded. The Russian side has been reported to have introduced new verification procedures for field communications across multiple fronts. Whether those changes were a direct response to Korshun or to a pattern of similar incidents is something neither side has publicly addressed. If this story showed you how a single captured radio can quietly reshape the decisions of an entire military command, then you are in the right place. On this channel, Every week, we bring you the operations that the regular news cycle moves past too quickly. The deceptions, the silences, the small choices that change the outcome of conflicts no one fully understands until years later. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the next analysis. Leave a comment below telling us which side of this story surprised you the most and which operation you want us to investigate next. Hit the like button if you believe that in modern war, the quietest weapons are often the ones that travel the farthest.